Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, I'm Dodge and this is Bigmeks Workshop and Paint Studio, and today we're going to do something a little different for the tips and tricks, and we're going to be using some water effects. Now this is just a regular 60mm base. You can see it's come from the scrap box. It's had all sorts of stuff glued to it. We're going to cut a big chunk of this out because before showing you these water effects I'm going to show you how I made a base for the water effects to sit in. All I've really done here is just take it out using a Dremel and then sanded the edges down. Now the edge that runs through the middle has been sanded down, so when I put the plastic card underneath it in a minute that it won't have such a hard line. Because I don't want that. I don't want the water to start and the land to just finish, you know, so sand that down quite a bit. You want to get it as smooth as possible. Next I'm going to be using this circle cutter, which is a handy tool if you haven't got one. You can pick them up off eBay or Amazon. That's going to help me make a circle that's roughly the same size as the base. And we're going through plastic card, which is also another useful tool for your hobby. All you need to do is score it a few times, and then as you can see you can just pop that out and it pretty much peels out of there. It's really fun material to work with, especially when building terrain or converting things. Sorry about that bit of footage, it's not as good as I wish it was, but I'm having a problem with the new light bulb. It's much brighter than the other one, which means the exposure is a lot higher. As you can see I've dry fitted that in there to make sure it's all snug. And I don't want to glue that straight in. I want it to, where I've sanded it down, I want the plastic card to slope so we can fill it with more water effects, giving the illusion that it's got more depth to it than it actually has. And because it's plastic card, you can just use any plastic glue you've got from Games Workshop, but make sure you put plenty of that on there. You don't want the liquid effects and the water effects leaking through, or you don't want your paints leaking through either. So I absolutely drowned the entire edges in that. But it's plastic card and responds really well with the plastic glue, as you would expect. Now you want to make sure you've bonded the sanded bit with the slope. That needs to be nice and flush, and as you can see there, the other side is now glued lower to the bottom. Next we're going to fill in any gaps that there might be with PVA glue, and the rest of the thing in PVA glue as well, and we're going to put a couple of layers of sand on there just to make sure there's no gaps. We're also going to give that a coat of a watered down PVA glue so it seals everything in, so there's going to be no gaps at all now. Now obviously I'm going to do a quick paint job on this so it doesn't look rubbish, and this is just Steel Legion drab through the airbrush. I'm not too fussed about the quality of this paint job. It's really a water effects tutorials that you're watching, so just threw a couple of paints on to make it quick and easy. And for the raised side I started using Castelian green through the airbrush. I want to give that a nice even coat. We also, if you're using a dry brush or another brush, you just want to blend it out towards where you want your water effects, because the grass isn't going to grow under there. I was going for sort of a marshland effect here, so I kept the colours pretty muted and dark. Death World Forest was then used with a brush and just stippled into areas to break up that green. I'm going to give it a dry brush, but I wanted to break up the underneath tones and colours so it looked more marshy. I'm just using a really old battered mixing brush for this one, because it doesn't even have to be neat. Then we're going to use a big dry brush of Gawthor Brown first, and what that's going to do is it's going to blend your sandy dirt mud areas to your land areas and really smear those together so it looks like things have been coming in and out of the water and there's no hard line. As you can see there's still a bit of a line there where the sanding was and the join is, and a bit of sand is gone in. Now we're going to highlight the rest of it with Carrick Stone. Really simple base idea, just wanted to get something done before we start using the water effects. I'm going to put some grass tufts and stuff on here as well as we go, to bring it out a bit more. Obviously if you're doing a different type of base you could do any colours that you want. This is just Agrax Earthshade watered down, and we're wanting that to pull near the lower edge of the base and feather it out towards the top. This is going to give the illusion that it sinks a lot deeper than it does. And I'll do several coats of that to really darken it down. Now I'm not a master of water effects by any means, but this is one of the ways you could do it. I'm going to show you another way as well in a minute. This is just regular cling film, and basically I'm going to start cutting this into little strips to make waves. If you really wanted to, you could just cut this down, poke it into that bottom part and glue it before we do the other effects. Sort of an experiment. I wanted to see how it would show up against the water effects as well, sort of give the undertone of water coming back from the shoreline. But this base is going to have a big Carnifex on it. That's all we're doing is rolling that up and trying to bring up the front bits, trying to bring up the wave at the front so it looks like it's crashing into the shoreline or the edge. All I'm going to do is use regular PVA glue to bond that one. And this is just an old pound shop brush that you get in a big set of brushes. We've got tons of those around the studio because we just use them and throw them away. So like I was saying with the cling film, you can do as many strips of this as you want, or none at all, or you could just use it as your entire base as a reflective surface. You could also just coat that afterwards in a gloss varnish with a bit of colour to it. So I think after building this base, I'm going to do a couple of others in the future. Now this is what it's really about, the water effects by Vallejo. This stuff is mainly used for making waves, so you can see this attempt at making waves if you haven't got it, and you can put gloss or PVA glue over it. This stuff takes a lot longer to dry than I thought it did. I've turned the exposure on the camera down because it's a bright white and you couldn't see what I was doing, so that's why the camera's a bit darker. It's also an old pot, so I'm using a coffee stirrer to just mix that around and make sure it's not too lumpy and half set so I can still work with it. And basically I'm going to scrape that off just like buttering a piece of toast into there, just to start filling it up so I've got something to work with. It moves around a bit like porridge, it's not too difficult to sculpt around and everything. But like I said, this was a bit of an experiment. And once we've got a nice coat of that, we're going to start stippling it in a minute. But if it dried a lot whiter than I wanted it to, it took 48 hours for mine to dry, and I sat it on a radiator with the Carnifex on, waiting to see how pale it would become, but I'd not used this before. So what we're going to do is stipple this brush and make hard, shallow lines. We're going to make a little trench using the brush, and because it's being stippled, it's going to make a broken up pattern rather than a solid piece of the Vallejo effects, you know, one solid tube of it. We're going for a broken up sort of look, which will look like waves when it's done. And at this point I'm just making a hole for the Carnifex's foot to go in, because the waves are going to be crashing up against the foot as well. It's mainly the Carnifex disturbing the water, I guess, if it's a marsh base. Now that took 48 hours to dry like that. This stuff's really meant, apparently it's just meant for making waves, which it does, but I wasn't happy with how white it looked because I could have done this with PVA glue. So then I've mixed Army Painter Strong Tone and a little bit of gloss varnish, and I'm just going to use that like a wash. Because it's gloss and the other surface texture is pretty smooth, it's going to run most of that wash into the dark areas, but it is going to tint any little dimples that we've got in the waves, which will give the effect of water swirling around and picking up dirt. I ended up giving that 2 coats just to tone it down to the way I wanted it, but it's all a matter of preference. If you want it a bit lighter, or maybe you're doing a bright blue water, I haven't tried mixing the paints into the actual materials yet, into the water effects. But there you have it. Once it's you know, dried for like 24 to 48 hours and you've added a couple of washes on it, you've got something that resembles a murky water. All that's really left to do is to touch up the model in places, because he was for the previous tutorial, and add some grass tufts to bring the marshland to life a little bit. It's pretty simple stuff, guys. We'll bring you more stuff on effects, I think, in the tricks and tips, and there you have it. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you in the next one.